Rear Admiral Peter Hudson, and I'm the Operation Commander for the European Union Naval Force currently operating off Somalia in Operation Atalanta. And I've been there for about 10 or 11 months. And with me today, I have my Merchant Navy liaison officer who runs our security center at Northwood, who can talk to you about particular issues there, as well as some other experts. So in the question time that we have later on this afternoon, if we want to go down some rabbit holes, explore particular issues, then hopefully I've got enough expertise around me to answer your questions. The other apology I'll make is that, like all military officers, we speak in gobbledygook, and I drift into acronyms and use three-letter abbreviations far too frequently, or so my wife tells me. So if you hear me drifting into military nonsense, just stick your hand up and I'll correct myself. I think I'll talk for about 20 minutes, and then the main part of this afternoon is to have a two-way dialogue, if I could put it that way. Next slide. This is the Atalanta mission. This is the task that was given to me in the autumn of 2008 when the European Union decided that the level of piracy being experienced in the Gulf of Aden was completely excessive. And in responding to 4 UN Security Council resolutions, the EU needed to do something. On top of that, humanitarian aid, so vital to the people in Somalia, was threatened by pirates who were attacking the aid ships running from Mombasa. So that persuaded the EU to deploy a force. From the first concept, which was in September the 20th of 2008, to the first force being in theatre under command of a Greek commodore was only 9 weeks. Now for the EU, I'm not a great Europhobe, I'm not a great sort of historian of EU history. That's an impressive response to get the orders, to get the clearance through the political governments, to deploy the ships, rules of engagement, and be on patrol in 9 weeks. And I think it reflects the importance that the community gives to this vital strategic artery that is the Gulf of Aden, and also the wider part of Somali Basin, where all sorts of interests, whether it's fishing, the leisure industry, cruise liners, take part. And the EU needed to be right at the forefront of the response. So we're there now, and we expect, as you can see from my mandate, to be there until the end of this year. What happens then, I hear you ask? Well, the problem of piracy will not stop on the 12th of December, when the mandate extends. So Europe is now looking at how we can extend the mandate for 1 and probably 2 years through until 2012. And I would expect approvals for that to come through from Brussels in the early part of this summer, May or June or thereabouts. So we're not stopping this task. This will run on for some time yet. I just want to draw out 2 or 3 points on this mission. It's clear, it's unambiguous, it's not with clouded aspirational language, rebuilding the Horn of Africa. It's look after humanitarian food, look after vulnerable ships, and where you can, go and arrest some pirates. That's essentially what I've been told to do. So I can deliver against this mandate, and I like to think that over the last 14 or 15 months, the European Union force has made considerable progress, and we'll look at that. I'm going to concentrate in this presentation on my interaction with the merchant community. But before I move on, just one word on humanitarian, the World Food Programme. 350,000 tons of food were delivered under the close escort of European Union ships to Mogadishu, Bosaso and Berbera on the north coast last year. That is about 75% of the food required to feed the people of Somalia. It is a demanding task because the ships are slow. They're what they term the bottom feeders. The World Food Programme wants to spend its money on food, not chartering ships. So the means of delivery are pretty hard and slow. So nearly a third of my force, and today I've got 7 ships in theatre, is taken up with providing security to World Food Programme ships. It's quite asset heavy on my behalf. And what we're trying to seek is international approval from flag states, and they're not difficult ones, Sierra Leone, Comoros, Marshall Islands, and so on, to give me approval to put military forces, small teams, on board these World Food Programme ships to provide them with the safety. 5 or 6 Royal Marines will provide the security that a €500 million destroyer does today. And I can do other things with that destroyer. So that for me is a challenge which I hope the Brussels political team will solve. But let's move on to the wider merchant community. Next slide. This shows how piracy has changed. I often quip that the first Royal Naval Patrol of East Africa was in 1718. So 300 years ago, the Royal Navy was closing down pirate groups, in that case operating out of Zanzibar. But you can see how the challenge of Somalia has changed over the last 6 years. Initially, close into the coast, particularly on the north coast and around Mogadishu. But over the years, it's got further and further and further away. And the easternmost attack there, which was only a week or so ago against the Phrygia, 1,100 miles of Somalia, closer to India than it is to Africa. Northmost attacks there you can see against the Shirel in June of last year, just south of Muscat, and just this morning another ship seized going into Aden. So their footprint is extremely large, which makes it difficult when you only have 7 ships to cover an area of 1.5 million square miles. And we'll come back to why that's important in a minute. Next slide. What's been the response of the global trade? Well, this is a picture which you'll be very familiar with. You can see that artery through the Gulf of Aden and then the spread of ships as they run across to Sri Lanka or up into the Gulf, into the Persian Gulf, or south down towards the Cape coming out of India or indeed the Gulf itself. Those circular dots you can see at the bottom are the European fishing fleet, so the Spanish and the French tuna fleets operating down in the southern part of the Somali Basin. So today we are spreading the word. The message is generally getting out to the merchant fleets, stay clear of Somalia, there be dragons. And you can see from that rather black piece there that in general, the majority of ships plying their trade through the Indian Ocean stay well clear of Somalia. But they're forced by geographic constraints to go through the Gulf of Aden. So my second priority after that World Food Programme load is to put my warships into the Gulf of Aden. 30,000 ships a year, and myself and NATO and the coalition forces in Bahrain maintain a fleet of 6 to 8 warships in there, day in, day out, to make sure that any activity we can close down. And I'll come back to that in more detail shortly. Next slide. This is just a little summary, which many of you will have seen, about activity in the Gulf of Aden. You can see the autumn of 2008 when many agencies, not just the EU, China, Russia, Malaysia, decided to act. A real spike in attacks with upwards of 30 ships seized in the space of 4.5 months. We looked at how we were doing procedures, having arrived there in December 2008, and we implemented them in the early part of 2009. And I think this picture shows a good story of how we've made progress in the Gulf of Aden. Since June of last year, we have lost about 6 ships in the Gulf of Aden and the immediate area, but only 2 of them have been in the IRTC, in the corridor that runs through the Gulf of Aden. Therefore, if we follow best management practice, if we follow the guidance on where the corridor is, if we register with my security centre, then the risk, whilst never ever eliminated, the risk is reduced significantly. And I think that's a good graphical way of showing it. Is it all down to the EU and NATO? No. I think there's a large part of it. But human smuggling has been on the rise across the Gulf of Aden.